Hey guys, welcome to our presentation. It's on Rosemont's role-playing persons. So we'll start with the text. It's going to be chapter 6, page 94. And in this, Rosemont is basically just defining the Confucian individual. So by emphasizing our sociality, the Confucians simultaneously emphasize our relationality. An abstract individual I am not, but rather, as Ames emphasizes, a particular son, husband, father, grandfather, teacher, student, colleague, neighbor, friend, and more. In all of these roles, I'm defined in large measure by the others with whom I interact, highly specific personages related to me in one way or another. They are not abstract autonomous individuals either. Moreover, we do not play these roles, as we tend to speak of them, but rather we live our roles. And when all of them have been specified and their interrelationships made manifest, then we have, for Confucius, been thoroughly individuated, but with nothing left over with which to piece together an autonomous individual self. Being thus the aggregate sum of the roles I live, it must follow that as I grow older, my roles will change, and consequently, I become quite literally a different person. Essentially, Rosemont's point is that momentarily speaking, we are defined by the particular relationship with those we are interacting with. For example, when I'm speaking with Dr. Mason, I am his particular student, Ian Wu, and he is the particular professor, he is my particular professor, Dr. Mason. I would not address him the way I would a friend, and he would not address me the way he would a coworker, because that's not the proper role. Second, we live these roles, which combine to individuate us. So when we are performing these roles, we are not simply playing them. Rather, we are these roles. And these roles altogether combine to create us as a whole. Third, as time passes, these roles will change and we acquire new roles. So, for example, friends can become enemies, or fathers whose children have children acquire the new role of grandfather. Finally, since our roles change, and we are the aggregate sum of our roles, we too change constantly. So this is essentially a conversation about selfhood, and in particular, the composition of a self. Rosemont challenges the Western definition of the self in this passage. Um, so recall, the Western individual is abstract, unchanging, and autonomous. In other words, there's something innate within us, which defines us and does not change. Secondly, we make decisions which define us, and we define ourselves. On the other hand, you have the Confucian individual, which is relational and in flux. The Confucian individual is not at all the same over time. As already stated, our roles constantly change. And because we are our roles, then we too must constantly change. Uh, what's more, the Confucian individual is defined by relationality, or the relationships we have with others. So then the Confucian individual relies on others to help define the individual. It does not define itself like the Western individual. So recall the peach and onion discussion. I know we talked about this a little bit, but I think it's really good. Um, so the peach is a metaphor for the Western individual, and the pit of the peach is this innate substance that within us defines us and is individual to us. On the other hand, you have the onion, which is the metaphor for the Confucian individual. And each layer of the onion represents a different role. All of these layers or roles, when put together, create us as a whole. So after reading this and thinking about it, I came up with a comparison that I think is pretty interesting, and that's with Rosemont and Plato's tripartite soul. So before I go into this, it's important to understand that these two theories are actually very different. Rosemont admits that he's actually providing um, the definition of the self, which is pretty much completely opposed to the typical Western definition, like Plato's. Um, anyways, we'll go into this comparison now. So, just a quick reminder, Plato's tripartite soul is split into three parts, those being rational, spirited, and appetitive. And what's important is that each part has its own specialized function. So, I saw two parallels here that I thought were interesting. First, in the same way that for Rosemont, each relationship calls for a proper role. Um, Similarly, each part of Plato's soul has a proper function. So, when applied, in any given situation, for Rosemont, we must choose to perform the proper role. And for Plato, um, the proper soul part will perform its proper function in that situation. The second parallel that I found was that the idea of several parts combining to make a whole. So again, with Rosemont, we have that all of our roles together, when combined, individuate us. Similarly, for Plato, all of our soul parts working in unison combine to create us as a whole. That's about it. Thank you.